Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I have on the program a non-local to Toronto, a relatively well-established gentleman in his practice. He has multiple awards, some Governor General awards. Is that correct?
Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant Governor awards. And we had our first chat a couple of weeks back, and we had a really nice chat. So today on the program I have Peter Braithwaite from Peter Braithwaite Studios, also known as PB Studio. Peter, thank you for joining.
No, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So Peter and I had chatted a little bit a couple weeks back. Got to know each other a little, understand what this whole podcast is about and what the intentions are of it. And so I'll delve into some of the topics that we discussed then that others haven't yet heard. Those that may know you will probably find out something new over the course of the next little while. So if you don't mind, Peter, tell me a little bit about, some of the early onset of interest for you in getting into design and architecture. What did it look like for you at an early age?
Sure. I when I was doing my early degrees, and even before my first university degree, I worked in lumber yards, and later I went to UBC in Vancouver and worked as a carpenter and worked in lumber yards during that time. So when I finished my first degree, I took on a job as a full-time builder, a carpenter, and a cabinet maker in Vancouver. And through that time, I just became more and more interested in design and having the control over designing the things that I built. That was of great interest to me. And through, some rather difficult winter conditions and framing in the Mount Seymour foothills over in North Vancouver, I got to thinking, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? I've spent a lot of time studying in the academic sense, and am I just going to fall through as a carpenter, or am I going to engage more in my interest in design? So at the time I decided I was going to apply based on rather difficult winter conditions. There was just one school that was still accepting applications, so I applied to the only school that would still take my application, which was Dalhousie. And to
be honest, not a bad school to apply to.
Yeah. And I had really no bearing other than I went to UBC. When I went to UBC, I used to walk around the architecture school. I had some art history classes there, and I knew I was interested in it, but yeah. Anyway, I didn't really have a bearing on which schools were better or not. It was just they took my application, and I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. And the next spring came, and the sun
Your hands finally thawed.
Yeah. We're having a great time framing again in the nice part of the year, and Susanna, who still is the secretary at the school, had called me, and she calls all the accepted applicants directly, and she called me directly and just said, "You're in." And then I was in a bit of a, am I actually gonna move from the West Coast to the East Coast? Am I gonna pack up my entire life and go? And ultimately I thought, it's an opportunity. Winter's coming again, I may as well. And so I packed up and just rented a U-Haul, towed my old Jeep Cherokee, and just went from coast to coast and rented a house and just started studying at Dal.
Wow.
A partner at the time came with me, and she lasted one semester. We had been dating for a decade, and she was like, "This is crazy,
I'm out. I can't do these
hours, never leaving the studio." Yeah.
I guess it kind of worked out for the better.
Yeah. I fell in love with Halifax immediately. Vancouver is an extraordinarily beautiful city.
Yeah.
There's a lot to love about it, but coming to Halifax, immediately I felt like I was coming home. It was just such a whole, beautiful environment, like a very town. Like I grew up in a small town, and coming to Halifax.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in southwestern Ontario. We like to refer to it as the armpit of Ontario.
Where did you grow up? What town?
What's that?
What town?
It's called Kingsville.
Okay.
It's the most southern town in Canada. It's as far down as you can go. It's right actually below the Windsor-Detroit crossing. So, as you go right down, as low as you can go in Ontario, it's right there with Michigan on the other side of the border across the Great Lakes. And I grew up in a small agricultural mainly town, a really flat part of Ontario. We grow tons of tomatoes. Heinz ketchup was made there, shipped around the world. It's like big tomato. Our neighboring town is called the tomato capital of Canada. It's called Leamington. So the small time feel of, coming to Halifax with the, coming from a small town.
Yeah.
And though it was a larger city and it didn't have the amount of urban growth that's happened since, it just had like, a small town feel to it. And I really love that. That in addition to a really beautiful coastline. It's very different than Vancouver. We don't have the mountains and we don't have, the forests as dense as they are there because of our bedrock. But there's a rugged beauty to the coastline here and the type of, natural ecology here that It's really kind of drew me in. Yeah.
And the topography, I mean, as you describe it, is like, it is completely different with cliffs versus mountains.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It is very different. And the building practices, relating it back to architecture, there's a stark difference between the two. In Vancouver, we're building these long sweeping overhangs to like hide us from all the rain all the time. You come here and there's no overhangs, because the wind is so strong. It's part of the vernacular here that, it's that, people like to refer to it as the Monopoly house, where it's just, there's the gable without any overhangs. It's kind of jarring at first being a builder in Vancouver, saying like, we don't do overhangs at all here. Your main concern is holding yourself to the ground.
Yeah, I was gonna say like uplift, right? Like
uplift. Like gravity is simple. It's worrying about the wind blowing you away. And the building culture here, obviously the same as Vancouver, where we do light timber frame construction, but just these light little spindly sticks we put together to create buildings. And it's how do we prevent them from blowing away? And it is, looking at going to Peggy's Cove and these beautiful little fishing villages, it is even still that I start to understand how they're doing it with the vernacular techniques. It's still look at them and wonder, how is it not, how has that building stood there for 100 years? It's wild with the storm crashing and the surf crashing and the high winds, but they figured out really novel ways of doing it. And yeah, that was a stark difference from Vancouver, but also one of great interest because it definitely, the hurricanes and the high winds are the major impact on the way you design here in the East Coast. Yeah.
And so you went to Dal, you did your undergrad. Was there a school that you studied beyond the undergrad? Did you do a master's program?
I did at Dalhousie. It's a bit, the different architecture schools in Canada have different formats. I think some have a 5-year undergrad in architecture and then a 2-year master's. Dalhousie you can come in with 2 years, but it's rare. Usually almost everyone comes in with an undergrad. Yeah. And the 2 years are, you do a Bachelor of Environmental Design, which I'm just realizing what that actually means through some of my PhD work. And then you do a 2-year master's. So it's actually, you have to get accepted into the master's after the bachelor. So I did those two together. So what's that?
You did a combination?
Well, I did them one after the other in theories. Yeah, in theory. So directly after the bachelor, right into the master's. And that gives you your ability to become a licensed architect. So I wanted to just get that done right away. So I did my internship, my professional internship at Omar Gandhi's office. I did my co-ops at MacKay-Lyons Sweetapple when I was in school.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I could, I wrote my licensing exams sooner than they thought was appropriate, but I just wanted to push it through and got licensed as quick as I could. In all honesty, I started a company prior to being licensed, which the associations don't really like that. I didn't call myself an architect, but I was actively doing design and construction work prior to being licensed. But I rapidly got all the hours figured out and got my exams done and got licensed as quickly as I could.
And you didn't, and you also, in saying all of this, you have not gone ahead and taken the traditional path of just simply running an architecture practice.
No, not at all.
So what is that? And when you started the studio, did you start it as that? And I have not described what that is yet. I will allow you to tell the people
Yeah.
listening what.
Yeah. I had the desire from the time I started, even came to the East Coast to have a design build, because it was construction that led me to architecture. And I always had the desire. I mean, having a hammer in your hand, like being able to actually physically build the things you design, was always a desire of mine. Because I mean, since I was a kid, my folks always said, he just loves working with his hands. I am fundamentally a craftsman. Like I like building things with my hands, making things with my hands. So the idea of just sitting at a computer and flicking a mouse all day, that seemed like a form of torture to me. So it was like it was a combining of the two. And I think the work I did in university clearly showed, like, intricate models and building things out of wood and making things. And Dalhousie is wonderful for that. Like, the school is, some people might argue it's a little bit behind maybe in some technological ways, which they've caught up. I mean, but there was a time where it was like Dalhousie is so rooted in hands-on tradition that other schools are, teaching BIM. But I think that's what's wonderful about Dal, especially when I went through, is it really supported the handcrafts and really supported drawing by hand, making physical models instead of depending on digital technology to do it. So Dalhousie, I mean, it was a perfect fit for me. It was totally luck. I could apply to any other school. That I went to a school that really embraced just the way that I was, built, that I fit in really well into that program. So when I got out, it seemed obvious to me that at some point I would start my own company that was fully design build. I worked with Omar, and Omar was just starting his firm. I was Omar's first Omar Gandhi Architect. I was his first employee, like full-time employee. He had a couple part-time before that, but I was the first to come in and say, like, we're kind of in a way building this together. And there was a short time where we were going to partner. We talked about that and we kind of looked into the legalities of it. But I think fundamentally, like, I wanted to be in a field with a hammer, and that it just didn't work into that type of studio environment. So I left Omar's firm, and I started, like I said before, I was licensed.
What year was this?
This was 2012 or 2013, I think it was. I finished school in 2014. Sorry, 2014 it would have been.
So it's your 10-year anniversary this year?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah, we put together a monograph, which is coming out in the next, it's out now on Amazon, Natural Forces it's called. So we put together our first book, and yeah, once we get the books in our hands, we're going to have a 10-year kind of celebratory thing at the School of Architecture here and at the Central Library. Yeah. And I think we're also doing an exhibition. We are, but not till next year, at the Beaverbrook Gallery in Fredericton. We're going to try to, once we put together the exhibition, we want to put it in as many places as we can, get the most bang for your buck, so to speak. But right now we have a few spots in Atlantic Canada. We're going to do it. But yeah, we do kind of want to make a bit of a celebration, 10 years, making it 10 years. Yeah.
What I did want to say, I mean, there was a point there where I kind of sighed at one of the comments you made. I don't know. I don't know if it was only me, but
Yeah.
I'll say this, and this is not to, be boastful in any way, but you say that, you could have gone to any school, right?
Yeah.
And there are times in life when things align. They just align.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is very good likelihood that that was an alignment for you. There was a path. It is not luck. The school you happened to apply to was the school that you should have applied to, and you've landed where you're supposed to have landed.
Yeah, I full-heartedly believe that. I mean, I really feel like I was meant to be in this place. This place feels like home.
Yeah.
Can't imagine ever leaving. But it's such a bizarre, like,
what are the chances?
anything east of Montreal, from a West Coast standpoint, they don't even know. Like, quite honestly, I could have asked my friends in Vancouver to point out Halifax on a map, and they couldn't do it. It's like anything east of Ontario, even, they're like, what's over there? I'd have people actively say, why would you move there? But I mean, it was I had never been here before. I moved blindly, and it was a risk, but it was something that I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I hadn't done it.
Yeah.
It really feels like it aligned in a lot of ways for me.
when I was young, my father was my dad was a lawyer his whole career, and a
Yeah.
part of what he was engaged with was what was called the Canadian Bar Convention. And so
Okay.
every year, lawyers and judges would meet in a different city across Canada. And so
Hmm.
one of the coolest experiences I had in my youth was at the end of every summer, we would go on the trip to a different city in Canada. So I got to see a lot of Canada as a part of this. And I
Right. Right.
remember when I went to Halifax, I was enamored with how
Yep.
incredible that city was. I was the history, the heritage, like the I can't think
Citadel,
of it.
maybe
Sorry?
the Citadel, the main, the Citadel
No,
is like the
the
center of the city.
uh oh my God, in war. I can't think of the term. Like all the bases that
Oh
were
yeah, right, yeah, yeah. The Citadel being one of them. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah. Sorry.
forts maybe you're thinking. Yeah,
Yeah, force. Thank you. Oh my God. My kids have just said to me, they're like, "Can you build us a fort?" I'm like, "No, I got this interview."
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like the forts, and like you walk through those, and you can imagine what it would have been like to
Mhm.
protect the country against people that were coming in, and
Yeah,
that was like the first line of defense in many ways.
yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the Citadel. That's why I said that is
yeah,
it's the fort at the top of the highest point in Halifax, and it faces the harbor. And the primary intent was to protect the harbor and
yeah,
have cannons, facing down towards the harbor. And
yeah,
throughout the development of Halifax, which is happening quite rapidly now, protecting that sight line between the Citadel and the harbor is still something ingrained in like. It's just recently that they've eased up a little bit on you can't build a building in that
in
sight
that
line.
in that sight
You
line.
know?
I mean, as they
Yeah.
should, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's part of like Canadian history.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And the other thing is like all the archaeological sites
Yeah.
in and around Halifax, like they're just incredible. So,
Yeah.
sorry, I digressed a lot, but like just I can appreciate what you're saying about like feeling connected to that land.
Yeah.
Like just you
Yeah.
arrive there and there's something about it.
There's something about it that is a deep rooted. I think I hadn't really been exposed in a living sense, like where I've lived in a place that has such a long tradition
Yeah,
of like cultural tradition. Vancouver, as beautiful as it is a really new city. Like it's, I don't know, 100 years old compared to Halifax, which, it has a much longer tradition than that. And to see all these traditions and the way people do it, and there's vernacular forms that aren't just built because, for aesthetics, they're very rooted to the climate. And yeah, it's quite wonderful. And I mean, there's a patina, a type of wear to a city that only can authentically happen over years. When you can see where they built on, the old stone foundation with brick on top of it with timber, and you can see how it kind of over time melds into this wonderful patina that the city has, and you can't fake that. It has to just be authentically built, and that's something that I think other cities in the western side of Canada don't have. They're just too new. Like the glass and steel city of Vancouver. I mean, there's a certain beauty to that too, but it's very different.
different.
It's not as rooted in culture.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's
yeah.
your description of that though. That's going to stick with me. I'm probably going to reference that in other interviews. The patina of the city.
Yeah.
That's I really like that. So tell me, like, what was it like? You go out on your own. Everyone in some
Yeah.
ways has this story. Okay, I go out on my own.
Yeah, I
What
think
what
mine
do
was,
projects look like? What does your studio look like? Well, like, did you create a business plan for what you were going to go do?
yeah, right. No,
Yeah,
no,
right.
not. I should have now that I know. And I mean, I can go on at great lengths about the trials and tribulations of what I have done and what I'm doing. I went out rather naively thinking, all the clients we had when I was working with Omar, I was very critical of the builders, thinking they're making money like hand over fist and it couldn't cost that amount. So I designed a studio. I thought, as an architect and a builder would do, if I build the space, it should be easy, right? Instead of thinking like that's a massive capital investment, like that's your startup fund right there that you're wasting all on a building. So I bought a piece of land on the coast in Terrence Bay. It was a small fishing village. I actually went there with the builder that I was critical of, who is a fantastic builder, a friend of mine, and Omar. They actually introduced me to the site, who was being sold by another architect, which had a beautiful view of Back Bay, down on, it's about 20 minutes south of Halifax, little sheltered bay, traditional finishing town. And I just started designing a building, and the idea was I would have the shop on the main floor and I would have the computers on the second floor, and we could have this beautiful, engaging, poetic, transfer of ideas and between the builders below. And so it basically, it's on my website. It's one of the it's our first project. It's called MacKay-Lyons Studio. And it was where I worked and lived for 10 years almost. We're in the studio I'm in now, which is downtown Halifax. We just moved here about a year ago. Okay. Until then, we worked and operated out of that studio in Terrence Bay. So it took me, I built it, literally framed it mostly by myself. Like that was my job now. I would just go out there every day and figure out bizarre rigs and hoisting techniques to try to figure out how to build a 2-story truss on my own. It was an act of passion and just stubbornness that I could get this done on my own. Like, I was a carpenter, I had skill, but I'd never built a house literally on my own before. Yeah. How do you get a 14-foot 3-ply LVL 30 feet in the air? You can do it. It's not safe, but you can do it.
Did you have passersby going past being like,
my neighbors, would walk their dogs through, and I feel like in some ways they were just checking on me to make sure I didn't
just fall. Alive.
I was hurt on the ground, which could have very easily happened. It was just literally me by myself doing it. Yeah, so I struggled through that. I came up short, obviously. I didn't have enough money to finish the building. So that was kind of the start of taking on client projects, because It was like, I need to finish this building. This is everything I have is invested in this building. So I did the South End project. I did Elm House project, a bunch of projects that earn a little capital to finish the building. Eventually, I finished the building. We started doing it, design building the building, and it worked okay. But sawdust and computers aren't really like it was.
Friends?
No, it didn't really work as well. It became abundantly clear within the first year we need shops outside the building. So you can see on our studio, on our website, if you're interested, the Back Bay shops, joinery shops we call them, was secondary buildings that were built after we had the main building done. Then the main building turned into my primary residence and studio. I had a Murphy bed I would fold up every morning when the staff came in. So you got to be up. You can't sleep in. Everyone's showing up, bright and early.
You're in your boxer.
Like dressed and ready to go because they're coming in. And the building's a one open room. So it's not like you really have, I'll go hide in the basement till I'm ready. Yeah. So, and then, it was actually really great. We did everything in the projects from, first client meeting till the final nail went in. Cabinetry, millwork, all the finishes, all the architect, everything was in-house. And we had a lot of wonderful clients that took a risk on us when we really didn't have a lot of portfolio to show at that point, and we're like, we'll do everything. And we would, our sales point would be like, you don't have to bring someone into our relationship. It's just us and you the whole way. Like, we'll design it, we'll build it. But to talk about the trials and tribulations of all that is, you naively don't think about these things when you do it, but it's like the amount of insurance you have to carry, because a builder carries certain insurance and an architect. So it's like professional liability, general liability, builder's risk insurance, WCB, da-da-da-da. And it was just, holy, that's a lot of, and all of our insurance
$40,000 output in insurance a year is not a big deal.
Yeah, it was astronomical. And then when our professional liability insurance finds out you're building the building, not under a separate company that you own, but all under the same corporate name, your premiums go through the roof, right? They're like, this is too much risk. So yeah, we've been carrying
hold on
reinsurance just because we have to. But it's because we're against the grain, and there is design build contracts, but usually they're two different well-established entities that are working together to create. Whereas here it's like, from the first time we step on site to the time we hand over the keys and get occupancy permit, everything's done by us. And the added, layer to that is, and for better or worse, there's no one to blame. You own everything. Like, you can't There's no one you can say, well, the builder didn't understand the drawings, or, it's you're owning everything. If you come over budget, you're owning that. Like, so you really have to be very attuned with.
Collections that they made and the architecture are really driving this
Yeah.
budget up.
Yeah, there's been hurdles and frustrations, but ultimately it's been a really rewarding thing.
And tell me something. Were the first projects that you acquired, were they substantial projects, or were they smaller, like mini little renovations, or like in a small addition? Like, what did it look like as the first couple came in?
Yeah, the first few, I'm just trying to think what the first few were. The first one was a renovation to a house in the south end of Halifax, which is kind of known as the more affluent area of the city. We ended up, it was a bizarre relationship. A real estate agent wanted to use our services to basically go into a house and say, we can sell you this house for this much, but you could easily do these renovations to make it substantially more, or flip the house. So he would bring us to the meetings and we would say, oh yeah, we could renovate this house for X amount of dollars, which was way below the industry standard. And so by going to like being involved in the sale of the house, we kind of were shoot in as the builder, but a lot of them were in that time were renovations, substantial renovations, but renovations. And we never really did like the bathroom renovations or just a small room. Like most of them were
Whole home guts,
putting a house and putting it back together.
Yeah.
But wasn't it
Which
so
is hard, right?
What's that?
Those projects are very hard.
Oh, they are very hard. They are very hard. And luckily, I had experience with renovations in Vancouver as a builder. So I realized they're almost sometimes more difficult than doing it new. And I learned this when I was as a builder, like I said, in Vancouver, that, you can say to the client, oh, we'll just rip the old stucco off your Vancouver home and we'll just parge in new. And once you get to it, it's like, well, once we rip off the stucco and the stucco wire and the strapping and the paper, what are we left with? Just a pile of old 2x4s that are worth, like $100. It makes way more sense to just knock this whole wall off and start fresh, So yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing, but yeah, if I hadn't had that experience, I think we would have been in deep trouble, like with overextending what we think is possible. That said, I mean, during those days I still am, but workaholics. Like we had to put in, like, to be able to meet these budgets and these expectations of the clients. We were working 7 days a week. We're working
19 hours a day.
Oh yeah, like we were. Exactly. Putting in like 80 to 100 hours a week.
Yeah.
I would go home from work after 12 hours of doing construction and draw till I couldn't keep my eyes open. So we're ready for the next day. And then somehow on the weekend working on the Back Bay studio. It wasn't easy, not at all. Having a business plan probably would have been, I don't know what I would have done differently if I had a plan, but it definitely wasn't. It wasn't easy. It was a very trying time. But I think any business owner, especially in architecture or the building sector, realizes it's a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a tough industry. It really is. To do exceptional work in this industry it's not for the faint of heart. That's for sure.
No, and I think one of the reasons why we actually, through Walden, why we wanted to start this podcast was like the concept of getting the stories that you're describing now out to other practices, because there are some that are really young and there are some that are really well established, and not everyone talks, right? Right? Everyone's got their head down trying to work on the deliverables, and they don't understand that, like, what the strife they're going through is shared by the entire community.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard. It is really, really hard. That's not to say that it's a harder business than being a lawyer or being a doctor. They're all different, but there's this, you have I guess in many professions you do, but you have a seal, and that got a lot of responsibility to what you're about to go.
A lot of responsibility. Yeah. Yeah. Ethical, professional, moral,
Yeah.
It
Financial.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have a huge, as a business owner, you have a responsibility to the well-being of your staff, right? Yeah. You owe it to them. If they've given you trust that you'll make sure that they have a safe and a job that you're paying the bills and making sure they have healthcare or at any capacity. Or
That's what I was going to ask
um,
you actually, out of curiosity, is like when you started the practice and you got into some of these initial projects, at what stage, how many years in or how many months in did you have to hire staff?
uh, really quickly, I lucked out in the sense that one of my best friends when I grew up, he had a younger brother who was a carpenter, and he just kind of floated around. He worked in Alberta for a while. And he had an interest in coming to Vancouver. So right as I was kind of on the tail end of putting together my studio, he moved here with really no intentions of he was willing to put in long days and work long nights. And so I was really lucky in the sense that he came along for the ride in the early days when we didn't really have anything so it was just for the first few years, it was just, or a couple of years anyway, it was just me and him. He would help me with construction by day, and then I would draw by night. And then I would say probably after 3 years or so, we started gearing up staff proper. But I always would have to, out of necessity, hire the people that are on both sides. Like basically, I taught, I can't believe I did at that time. I was still teaching at Dalhousie School of Architecture. I taught there for 8 years or so. So that's a whole other story. I felt like Superman where I'd have to do the costume change and the smoke, or I'm in my dirty construction clothes, got to quickly change to go teach some students, change back and go back and get on the trowel of the concrete.
Sir, you've got some sawdust over you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wearing my rubber boots from the concrete pour while I'm teaching. Like, honestly, it was wild.
Caretakers just following behind you and cleaning up.
Yeah.
Like,
But yeah.
What's it called? What's the comic?
Yeah, it was wild. But it gave me the opportunity to meet a lot of students who came from the trades. There isn't a lot of them in the School of Architecture, but the ones that are seem to, they group together. Right. And knowing I was a builder, they would come and ask me about, light timber frame questions or things like that. Right. And so those ended up being the people that I hired in my office, because it's like, on Tuesday, we're going to go out and frame a building. And then on Wednesday, we're going to come back and try to get that drawing set done. And then, people that can draw, or they're architecture students, like they have an interest in design and being able to draw in our AutoCAD or BIM or whatever it is, but also be able to swing a hammer. And we're still doing that. Like our last co-op student, Jam, that was here, super helpful because he would be on site 30% of the time, and in the office the other part. So having employees, my associate Lucian, he's been here for 6 or 7 years now. He's a carpenter as well. He came from the trade. So being able to flip back and forth when you really have those pushes at the end of a project or something is extraordinarily valuable. Yeah.
So then at what stage, because you mentioned this before, at what stage did you have to look at getting the additional expense of a health and benefits package?
We did that about 5 years ago or so. Okay. It just seemed like, once we started building it was clear that we're building a real company now. It's not just, or we're sure that there's some longevity to this. It's not just people trying their hardest to get through the day. Yeah. We are at a point now that the office I'm sitting in right now, these staff that are here every day, and there's 4 to 6 of us here usually every day. They work 9 to 5. We never work weekends. We have a life work balance. It's not insanity anymore. But when we started making that transition to this has to be sustainable or not at all. Like, we have to figure out a way that we can do this, that people can earn a living and not have work dominating their life. Right. And so during those transitional phases, and trust me, I've done a lot of these like flow diagrams of how's this company work. We have carpentry over here, architecture over here. I float between the two, and then carpenters work for the site foreman, work for the, how does the tree diagram of the company work, that it's actually a sustainable, this is what I probably should have done on day one with a build it like a business plan, but it's evolved over the years. And now I think we're at a place that is stable and sustainable. And I would say about 5 years ago, when we were really trying to find stability and longevity, is when we started getting health benefits and started, making sure that staff are being, have a good life, work balance and all those sorts of things.
Right. And when we initially talked, you had said that, you were met with some pretty amazing stuff during the course of COVID and how it really like changed the course of business. So what was that like? That's 5 years ago, right? Now when it
I
started,
believe it's been that long. Yeah.
right? Almost 5 years.
Still evolving since then. I think that threw a bit of a tsunami or a tidal wave at us. And I would say we're different, and I've learned this the hard way. We're very different from a solo architecture firm or a solo build firm in the sense that there's no architects that are going to give us build projects because we are architects and they see us as competition, which is understandable.
Yep.
So they don't want us to be part. And there's the idea of too many cooks in the kitchen. Like we're too established as architects to not be involved in the design work. So it would be very difficult for us. I mean, it's partially us as well. It'd be very difficult for us to take a set of drawings and just zip it and just build the building. So, and no one would really give it to us anyway. So to be able to keep our build staff going, it has to start at the beginning. So it's dependent on us as the architects to market properly, to get the clients, to get people in, draw the drawing, to get everything lined up. So we have consistent work in the field. And a lot of that's dependent on the budget staying true and clients not being, scared right as we start the build. And COVID definitely scared everyone for a lot of reasons. We know, like, what's the security of the future just in general, but also, as we know, the building industry took a massive economic hit where everything was up in the air. So all our build clients right at the beginning of COVID were like, we don't know. Like we have supply chain issues. Windows we were 6 weeks out. Now we're talking 6 months or 8 months out. Like our timelines are off. We don't know, like, as far as sourcing material, as we know, I'm sure plywood went from, $20 for a half-inch sheet to $80 for a half-inch sheet.
Almost
and
100. Yeah.
It's just, it was wild. It was like in every budget, we had to tell every client, like, we can't guarantee anything. If you're willing to do a cost plus contract, we're willing to build it, but we do not know it. Also, as a result, a lot of projects like went on the shelf, went on hold. And then it was scrambling. What are we going to do with our builders? Luckily, I stupidly started some projects on my own, just as, like, I started them with what's called Free Lab. Dalhousie School of Architecture does this thing called Free Lab, which is a 2-week lab where you take students and in 1 week you're supposed to design the building, and the second week you build it, which is a little bit, you can't, like, you're basically teaching guys, students, how not to do it. No permits, just going at it, just building something as quickly and as half-baked as you've been. Anyway, I've taught it a number of times over the years, and the 1 year before COVID, we decided to build a boathouse for the community down on the water. We got into some zoning issues, so I was like, forget it, we'll just build it on my property. So in 1 week with the students, we had built, 13 trusses that were 20 feet tall, raised on stilts. And I just had that sitting there at the beginning of COVID, and we're like, well, either we finish this thing or we got to throw it out because the wind's going to take it down. So I luckily took all my carpenters and put them on that project, and we kind of worked our way through COVID. But during the COVID days, we really started to reconsider the way we deliver projects. And part of it was finances, and part of it was weather. Like, we have a very short building season here because it's really harsh in the winter. And part of it was just, we started getting a lot of clients outside of what was easy to service with our carpenters. Like, people would call us from Yarmouth down as low as you can go in Nova Scotia, or Sydney, the top of Cape Breton, which is, they're like 5-6 hour drives away. And we're like, we just can't. So our sales pitch, which is, we do everything from design to build, we now can't build it. And then we started thinking, well, why don't we do prefab? Why don't we do flat stack prefab? Not a volumetric prefab, but so we went in that direction, and we started a little company called Attic Dwellings, which has 5 prefabricated. All the drawings are done, fabrication drawings are done, engineering's done. And we started, we just built a project in southern Nova Scotia that it's 3 hours away, and we put it together, and I mean, it was watertight in 2 weeks, which was it's pretty amazing that you can do it that quickly. So I mean, there was that shift where it really made us think about the way we deliver buildings. But I think it's changed.
What the sale is, right? Largely what the sale is going to be.
Sorry, what was that?
What your sale is going to be. Like,
Yeah,
like you're flipping your company around in some way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 It has made a major. And I mean, there's pros and cons that come with both ways of delivering projects. But yeah, it's really changed the way we get a heck of a lot of inquiries about it. But I think there is a bit of a misconception that prefab is cheaper. Like I think people think because it's built in a factory that it's a much cheaper. There's a lot of benefits. There's like goes together faster on site. You get it closed in faster. There's not as much, destruction to the lumber, not destruction, but like your lumber doesn't get as wet. You can build things faster and cleaner and square and truer and straighter, all that stuff because you're building in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
All your adhesives work because you're not in the wind and trying to stick your like SA material. It just, I think you get a much better building in the end, but it doesn't necessarily mean much cheaper building because the cost of trucking and the cost of the cranes and the cost of transportation and all those things have to be equaled into the equation as well. But I think there is a lot of opportunity in Nova Scotia we've seen a huge push to, I'm sure it's happening everywhere, to manufactured homes as opposed to in situ stick build homes.
Yeah.
And Nova Scotia is just starting to gear up now, but there is a lot of that starting to happen here now.
So tell me, now you're at a stage, you're 10 years into the practice, right? If the official practice,
yeah.
You're still doing design build. So what does it look like now on a go forward basis? Even with what you're talking about in some form of prefabrication, like what does it look like for you now in terms of scales of project and I guess a path into where you're wanting to go with the practice?
Yeah. I've been actually getting this question quite a bit lately.
Have you?
Yeah, a lot of
forget it. If someone else already
I just had a client meeting yesterday, a new client, and they asked me the exact same question. Where do you see? Maybe it's because people can sense that we're in a bit of a transitional point in our company, and I think we do as a studio have a desire to grow into larger occupancy types. Like it would be great. I think any architect would love to do an art gallery or a library or something one day. And that's not something you're going to secure overnight. It's a long-term goal.
Yep.
And so, we're quite confident we won't get the projects most of the time, but we do go after RFPs for larger buildings. We team up with other firms in Toronto that have larger portfolios that, take us on under their wing to try to secure some of these jobs where we'd be the local firm and they would so I would say a long-term trajectory that's definitely of interest, but I would say short-term our interest, our growth in being builders and designers has paid dividends for us, not really so much in I think there could be a end game of construction. Like I don't know if we can keep it's hard to scale that up to the next scale. If we ever did larger buildings, moving into commercial construction seems unlikely. I think our little boutique thing of building houses and having light timber frame carpenters on staff seems like something that we could sustain moving forward, but moving up like different occupancy types. So I guess that what that means is we have to be more of architects and less of this in-between phase. And we have, with the staff in here, really tried to grow as architects. And I feel like that in myself as well. I really want to focus on design and architecture because building is an extremely challenging, time-consuming thing that you can't take your eye off the ball. Like it's being built right now and everybody wants my attention all the time, clients, staff, and it takes my focus away from really focusing on architecture. So I think we'll always have build as some aspect of the company, the very craft-based way we approach. But I think it's more so, and I should say we have 3 projects, clients on the go right now that are builders. Like construction companies have put out RFPs and have interviewed architects for, we think, really, really great projects. Right. And they selected us because, to put it bluntly, we can speak builder. Like they feel like they can spitball with us and speak off the cuff and come up with solutions where we're really ingrained in, we understand the cost of different assemblies, we understand how things go together, so we can speak in the capacity that a subtrade and the builder would talk, and they find that valuable, which we're super thankful for. It it was not something we intended, and it's not something we were looking for. It's just a repercussion of the way we've been delivering projects, that it put us in a position where we can fill this gap in architecture. I see ourselves as some sort of conduit between architecture and building, and we're a little bit closer to builders than perhaps architects that don't build. So they find, and I would say the other thing that it's done is it's changed the way we've drawn. Like, we used to draw very much like architects draw, which is, in a lot of ways, covering yourself from liability, just giving enough information the builder can figure it out, but not doubling, because then there's conflicts of information. Like, drawing in a way that's kind of ambiguous to a certain degree, so there's not too much information that you cause, like, whereas when we are drawing for our own team, we give everything. Like, we'll dimension the whole plan. Like, we don't want our builders on site trying to figure out what 5 and 11/16 plus, like, we want to give them everything they need. And if we make a mistake drawing, we just own it. But we'd rather make a mistake in the drawings and not have our builders standing around scratching their heads. So we've started to draw in a way that almost that it's like a like IKEA manual on steroids. Like, we create an architecture set and we create a fabrication set. And we've been doing that for other builders as well, saying, like, now you don't have to worry about there being a site foreman there to interpret the drawings and figure out how the wall needs to be built. We're giving that to you, which gives you a leg up, because you just say, here's the drawings, build it exactly like this. Obviously, it creates more liability on us as architects, because we're giving way more information than most architects would give, which liability comes with that. We just have to be confident that we know what we're doing, I suppose, because we could get ourselves into hot water. But whenever we've been moving into larger occupancy types like multi-unit and things like that, and we just have internal conversations. Are we 100% sure we understand the assemblies we're putting together? And we'll just have a conversation with the builder and make sure that we are doing it right, just so we don't run into those situations where they build something that's, and they're like, well, you specifically drew it with this specific, Yeah. The greater the level of specificity, the more liability.
Yeah, but you can also, it's still supposed to be in some ways a very, very iterative approach to being able to go and have conversations with people, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be. It's funny because at Walden, we also were, prior to me joining, we were a design build company.
Right.
And so we held the same level of liability and risk, and that client in-house, where we were competition to all of the people, both in design and build.
Yeah.
And so can associate. I understand what the strife can look like, because I had heard all about it.
Yeah.
So the concept of moving more into the architecture and away from the construction is actually, it's the opposite of what we did, because the guys that run it, Bruce and Danny that own the company, had never gone to school for architecture. They hadn't done that. It was a build company first. So it's interesting. I say that because it's almost like we're on the other side of that, having moved away.
Yeah, we were once in the middle, and we each took our
we went right. And it's an interesting thing to be able to move away from something that you had been doing for so long and you really tried to pursue, because it's one of those passions, right? And having the control.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it feels like it's a hard thing for me to swallow, to even say, like, oh, we're not going to build as much. Like, my parents were here last weekend just visiting to see my young children from Ontario, and they've seen the strife I've gone through and the amount of hard work and stuff. And I was telling them I'm going to slow down in the building area, and they understood. But my dad just said, "Are you going to miss it?" And I was like, "I am." I'm not saying like we're actually like, this is it, we're closing shop. It's just like we need to pick a route forward, and it's either we veer towards like architecture and design excellence, or sit in this middle ground and just say what we're doing right now is good enough, and we'll just keep doing that forever, or step back from architecture. And it's like, it's one of those things I'll always regret it if I don't try. It's like one of those things you'll sit in 20 years and say, I should have pushed this more. I shouldn't have just kept doing the hamster wheel. Yes. And I think this is the route out of the hamster wheel, is to like, it feels like how you had said in Halifax, it just fit.
Yeah.
The clients we're getting right now, the projects we're getting on our table, where it 4 years ago, we wouldn't have had enough architecture to quit construction. We needed it. It was a machine that needed both sides to survive.
Right.
Where it's like all this stuff has kind of fallen on our plate while we're making the decision. Well, it just feels like the world's, it's telling us, just focus on this for a while. Like just try to build up this side of the practice. And yeah, it is. It's nice to not have to do 4 outfit changes a day. I just come to the studio most days now. I still do construction a lot these days, but I mean, I'm not doing construction, school of architecture, studio. It's just getting more consistency in the way I guess my particular position in the company, I do things, which is.
So tell me, like, what does it look like now? And I wanted to try to do this quick because unfortunately, I do think actually, and I'll say it now, I do think we're going to need a part 2. I'm going to say it because there's a whole bunch of other stuff I want to talk about in terms of about how you've shaped the business, who the people are. I want to get into some of that and how the people you've assigned to look after different elements of this. I want to get into some of that, I guess, in another time.
Sure.
But what I am curious to know is in terms of your balance. So what does it look like now? You got to a stage where you just said, like, you're not having to do 4 outfit changes a day. Outside of the practice, what does family life look like?
Family life it's great. I got 2 little boys, 1 and 1.5 and 2.5. They're very close in age. They're starting to play together or fight together, whichever way you want to look at it. Yeah, no, it's great. And I mean, I've moved to the city recently. I lived out in Terrence Bay, which is in a family house, obviously. So me and my wife, we live in Halifax proper now because it's close to the schools, and our kids can go to all the various clubs and gymnastics and things that they need to do. I mean, aside from that, I'm the classic. I fill the void. If I take this off my plate, I'm going to shoe in something else. Am presently working on doctoral work, PhD and a Doctor of Design, as if one wasn't enough. That's a whole other story, how I got into two doctor programs at once. But that does take up quite a bit of my time as well. I'm doing a Doctor of Design to University of Calgary, which is a brand new program in the country. We've never had a Doctor of Design program in Canada that I know of. I think University of Calgary is the first. And I'm doing an interdisciplinary PhD program at Dalhousie University, which is studying the relationship of ecology and biology to architecture and how we create our urban environments. They both have very different approaches, but to studying the same subject matter, which is something we didn't talk about. But I studied biology and ecology prior to going to architecture school. My parents are veterinarians, but they studied zoology when we grew up. We lived in South Africa. My dad, they studied the game reserves when I was a kid. So I've been in the ecology biology side of it. My brother's a conservation biologist. My other brother is a physicist. So it's like,
we have so much more to talk about.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something I was passionate about during architecture school. And I mean, the way we design our projects and how we try to have them sit lightly on the land and all that kind of stuff is deeply ingrained in the work we try to produce. And being a builder has helped facilitate that. But I mean, there is a larger umbrella of knowledge creation, I suppose, or at least knowledge, gaining knowledge about how to do that better moving forward. Yeah, I mean, stepping back from building and just slotting in other things as we go.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right.
When
you have ambition and you want to learn, right? I mean, what strikes
I mean,
I've always had that is that you
I feel like learning is part of I can't not be part of the academic community. Like it satisfies intellectually, being able to just not doing the grind every day, but having a rationale and a reason for doing it. So when I finished school, I taught the whole time, and then I took a break from teaching to go back and do PhD. My wife's like, you get to learn or you get to teach. You can't do both. You can't. So I
what does she do?
I somewhat reluctantly step back from teaching until I'm done all these studies. But being part of a university at some capacity is fundamental for me. It gives a reason for doing it and trying to, you know, struggle to find rationale behind doing it, opposed to just making money and continuing the grind.
Right. What does your wife do?
My wife's in sales.
Okay.
She works for PepsiCo. She has a very practical job, which is great. It gives us, and she's extremely structured and extremely organized. All the things that I'm not. I'm like, my life is a game of whack-a-mole, where it's like, it's funny because she has access to our company calendar, and my staff will be like, you have to pick up Bo at 3. She's just like plugging it in, and I'm hearing from across the studio what my responsibilities are. So yeah, my work calendar is half family calendar. She plugs it in from afar, but I think it creates a great balance that me left to my own devices is a bit of a hodgepodge. It's scattered, whereas she's very regimented and organized, which makes things better for all of us, I would say, my staff included, and definitely me included. Yeah.
Peter, honestly, thank you for taking the time. For those of you, no one actually knows this outside of Peter and I, but you know, we have both been so busy that we agreed that we would actually do this discussion on a Saturday today. So I mean, we both just finished dropping our kids off of programs and coming back and then setting up time to do this. So I've got to say, man, honestly, thank you so much for joining on this. I'm going to send you a calendar invite or at some stage for a follow-up, because there's a lot more I want to get into.
Sure.
But it's humbling to be able to hear about the trials and tribulations of trying to get your practice off the ground, and then all of the things that you are doing. I mean, it is really, it's inspiring, because I'm thinking about how I have a lot left in the tank to be able to go and try and do for myself.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. No, it's been really fun talking about this. I mean, the conversation we had a week or so ago, and again, it's been really fun talking about. It's not very often, I said this last time, you actually get to talk and reflect. I mean, I just did the monologue, which I found was a wonderful experience, because it gives you an opportunity for reflection, which, you know, we usually don't. Usually it's eyes forward and never back. But I mean, I really appreciate this, because it gives you it's funny when you look back, you seem to find rationale and reasoning. It's easier to post-rationalize things than it is when you're living it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Likewise. Thank you very much. I'll text you later on about setting up another time.
For sure. Sure.
Man. Have a great rest of the weekend and a really productive week ahead.
Great. Thanks so much. Talk to you.